This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Africa coronavirus cases surpassed 73,000 as countries relaxed restrictions. South Africa's Ramaphosa says to ease the country's coronavirus restrictions cautiously. And Japan to lift a state of emergency in 39 prefectures. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me in studio is Raman Young with a preview of your business news.
That's right, Lindy. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Oil prices may have fallen by over 50% so far in the year, but Nigeria is maintaining its record spending plan of over $26 billion. And Libya's oil revenues are set to decline by at least 80% this year. We'll have the details and implications of that and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Lindy.
Thanks so much, Raman. Well, we start with the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. The World Health Organization has been warning that the virus could be here to stay and that a vaccine may still be a long way off. Meanwhile, there are over 74,000 confirmed cases and more than 26,000 recoveries across Africa. The death toll stands at over 2,500. This comes as more countries continue relaxing restrictions and begin restarting their economies. Multiple governments are working on plans to reopen schools. In South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa says lockdowns will be carefully eased. This after the country imposed some of the continent's harshest measures to flatten the infection curve. In Tunisia, President Kais Saied has announced the shortening of curfew hours. The North African nation has not reported any new cases in the last 3 days. Meanwhile, Kenya has been scaling up surveillance at its border after a surge in cases was reported in neighboring Tanzania. While coronavirus cases in Africa continue baffling many scientists, the continent has so far reported fewer infections and even fewer deaths compared to other parts of the world. Many experts predicted a disaster on the continent due to poor health systems. So how is Africa managing to defy the odds? Well, to answer this and other questions, we're now joined by CGTN's Robert Nagila in Nairobi. Phil Ihaza is with us from Abuja, and Adel Al-Makhraoui in Cairo. Dr. Samrat Shah, who is the medical director and consultant physician at MedHeal Hospital, also joins us via Skype from Nairobi. Now, let's start in Abuja. Phil, Nigerians are worried that a COVID-19 catastrophe is unfolding in Nigeria, and especially the ancient northern city of Kano. Are the confirmed numbers in Nigeria and the region close to what has been predicted?
Well, thank you, Lindy. First, I'll start with the official numbers by the health officials, the health agency, National Center for Disease Control. As we speak, the numbers, confirmed cases are 4,971, almost hitting the 5,000 mark. Over 1,070 people have recovered and been discharged, and then 164 deaths have been recorded. Now, in Kano State, which is the most populated state after Lagos in Nigeria, the numbers are 707 officially recorded by the agency, the health agency. But we know that in Kano, we're still waiting for official confirmation by the government officials, health officials, about a while ago where there were cases of mysterious deaths. And, investigations are still on as to what caused those deaths, where over 700 people died or reportedly died. So a verbal autopsy has been released. We're waiting for health officials to maybe, if possible, dig up those bodies, find out what exactly were the causes, was the cause of deaths by those numbers. That if at all it's as a result of COVID-19, it may shoot the numbers in that state to more than double And we've also heard similar reports, unconfirmed reports in some other states like Yobe State, where people are dying in the numbers. Over the past 1 month, hundreds of them have died, about 600 or thereabout, but we're waiting for official figures to confirm that as well. So data is actually a challenge where, a lot of people are complaining about the fact that they're not sure that the figures are the actual reflection of what is going on in the country, especially also because of the fact that the health agency has repeatedly said that the country needs to increase its amount of testing. A country with about 200 million in population, for us to test at a percentage of the population, that will mean that we should have tested 2 million by now in the past 2 months since the case was reported. But sadly, I must tell you that at the moment, Nigeria has tested just about 30,000. That's a really, really far cry from a percentage of the population, and also the reflection of the cases in the country. And so people are saying that more tests needs to be carried out, especially with the fact that it has spread to almost all the parts of the country, all the states in the country. There's also the report from one of the health commissioners in the epicenter, that's in Lagos State, that by July, cases in that state alone may rise to 120,000. That's also a very huge, that has brought a lot of fears and concerns to Nigerians, especially considering the health system, the standard of health system in Nigeria, and how that it may be overwhelmed. So we're just hoping that, the testing increases compared to countries like Ghana, which just has about 30 million in population. They have tested well over 200,000. So we're hoping that testing capacity increases, treatment also, or managing of those cases improves, so that we don't record so much deaths. That's the situation of things in the country. But if I'm to ask Adele over in Egypt, Adele, there's fears among Egyptians about the number of coronavirus cases, the count, saying that they're afraid that the count is a far cry from the reality. Tell us, what exactly is the current status of the numbers, and of course the reality on ground?
So the numbers in Egypt are growing quite significantly on daily basis. For example, today Egypt has reported 398 new COVID-19 cases and 15 new death tolls from the disease. And this has been ongoing for the past almost 2 to 3 weeks, with more or less the same rate. It went up almost to reach 500 daily, and then back in the past few days to 360s, in that range, and now it's picking up again to reach almost the 400 level. The total number of infections officially reported by the Egyptian Health Ministry is 10,829. Now, these figures are what is the only official source of number is the health ministry, and these figures are what has been officially reported. There are concerns that there might be bigger numbers, but to what extent, it is not clear. What we know for sure is that the number of testing that is conducted daily is not as sufficient as many people would like. There are many those who would suspect having the disease, but they would not have any channels to test themselves for COVID-19 unless it's through the public health sector that is specialized in the quarantine facilities and all supervised by the health ministry. And these facilities, they do not test anyone who would call, who want to make sure that he has COVID-19 or not. There have to be specific healthcare regulations, including showing symptoms, specific symptoms like fever, constant fever, and chest pain, and difficulty in breathing. So by the time people would test positive, many would be only having to go to the government facilities. No private sector is allowed to intervene or to provide the testing systems. And the number of tests that is conducted daily is not as much as people would like to. So in generally, there might be, the actual numbers might be a bit higher. It is really difficult to say for a fact, but we know that the government is trying to do, is following a transparency policy and has been trying to maintain that policy since day one. So if there are cases, it's probably that the government does not know that there are any other cases. There are those who also would fear reporting reporting cases of COVID-19 if they have the symptoms, because there are certain regulations in terms of death and burial procedures which violates the Islamic Sharia and the Islamic laws, and therefore people would try to refrain from reporting them so that they can have proper burial proceedings. It's quite complicated, and it is being the case to the extent that the government now is announcing a coexisting status of living with the virus in the coming weeks, and there has been regulations being implemented there. Now let's cross to Robert. Robert, in general, philanthropists and healthcare experts in the West have been saying that once COVID-19, the disease arrives to Africa, it will be a disaster. So tell us, what is it exactly like, the situation in Kenya, and is it any close to that speculations that it's near a disaster or not?
Well, Adele, initially there was that belief across the African continent that people across the continent were basically immune from COVID-19. However, that theory was quickly quashed when cases started being detected around February 25th. Now, part of the reason for that was because air traffic across the continent is not as much as what you see in Europe, North America, and in Asia as well. However, 4 months later, we're just coming up to the 4-month mark. We've only had about 70,000 cases across the African continent, close to 2,500 deaths and about 25,000 recoveries, raising more questions as to why we've not seen that huge surge that everyone had expected. That, experts say, may be largely due to a lack of mass testing across many countries on the continent, apart from South Africa, whose figures are very, very high. For much of the continent, we've not tested that much. Here in Kenya, for example, we are yet to get to the 1,000 mark, although, like in Nigeria and Egypt, it is suspected that there are more cases, although 70% of those that have been tested are asymptomatic cases. Now, we know that after an initial surge in 2 particular districts in the capital city and in the coastal city of Mombasa, the government locked down 2 particular districts, but now focus is now moving to the Kenyan border with Tanzania. Most of the cases that we've seen this week that have been confirmed are amongst truck drivers who are ferrying goods across the border between Kenya and Tanzania. So the government has now dispatched mobile units and more test kits to that particular border called Namanga, hoping that they will be able to carry out more tests so that drivers can be able to proceed if they're not confirmed. But like most countries, we're not testing as much as we should. That is the growing concern here in Kenya. But we have seen the government slowly ease lockdown measures that had been in place since March 25th, or around that time when we experienced our first case here in Kenya. Lindy?
Thank you so much, Robert. Now let's bring in Dr. Samrat Shah into the conversation. He joins us from Nairobi via Skype. Doctor, as we're hearing from our correspondents in West Africa, North Africa, and here in East Africa, testing capacity is an issue that is being highlighted as possibly one of the reasons that Africa's confirmed cases and indeed fatality figures are lower than expected. Doctor, in your view, has Africa defied the odds, and is the worst behind us?
I think we have not yet defined it. You see, we are talking about calmness before the peak right now. As WHO had told us that by May 4th, African continent should be prepared to go for testing of at least 1,000 population per 1 million population. But in fact, unfortunately, we have not yet reached that target. You see, when we talk about South Africa, it has reached a target of 6,000. But apart from South Africa, none of the countries are even able to reach 500 per million population testing capacity. So if we talk about Kenya, we have reached around 687 per million population, which is way less than what was expected from WHO. So I think this is the reason why we are seeing a low fatality rate compared to that of other countries. And I feel the curve is still ascending, and it's not a right time to comment about this because you see, America saw 2,500 deaths in the time of around April 27 or 28. and look at the data today. So I think we are still going to reach the peak. That's what I feel.
So perhaps this is the calm before the storm. But even so, Doctor, we have about 73,000 confirmed cases and about 26,000 recoveries, which is fairly impressive. How do you explain the high recovery rate in Africa?
You see, when we talk about recovery rate, it's not about Africa continent as such. When you look at Senegal, the African continent, Senegal, there the recovery rate is 60%, but that's not the same in the entire Africa as such. When you look at Morocco, the recovery rate is only 15%. So I think it's not generalized term to be applied as such, but definitely there are few factors which are helping us. Like we got a time lag of around 2 months, I can say, wherein we were able to prepare ourselves for the pandemic and cut the curve sooner. Because the curve started peaking up in late March for us, whereas it was very early for them compared to United States or Spain. That is one reason. Second reason I feel is because we get repeated infections, because these pandemics are very much well known to us. I think there is some kind of immunity that must be playing role. There are some theories suggesting that BCG vaccine must be playing some role. But anyways, these are all conspiracy theories. We have nothing yet proven. But it's a good thing that we have a good recovery rate compared to that of other countries.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Samrat Shah, joining us there via Skype in Nairobi. And a big thank you to our correspondents, Adal Al-Makhroui in Cairo, Phil Ihaza in Abuja, and Robert Nagila here with us in Nairobi. Now, South Africa is set to further ease lockdown restrictions by the end of May. President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the nation on Wednesday, explaining the implementation of a risk-adjusted approach. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
The risk-adjusted strategy determines the severity of the lockdown here in South Africa, and it's based on alert levels. Level 5 is a hard lockdown, while Level 1 means the lockdown will be almost completely lifted. Over 2 weeks ago, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the easing of the restrictions by moving the country from Level 5 to Level 4 lockdown. Addressing the nation on national television on Wednesday evening, the president announced a further easing of the restrictions by the end of May.
We are now preparing for a further easing of the lockdown and a gradual opening of our economy. Our goal is to steadily increase economic activity.
The president asserted that lifting the lockdown too quickly is risky.
The best current estimate is that without the lockdown and the other measures that we have taken, at least, they say, 80,000 South Africans could have been infected by now. And the death toll could have been at least 8 times higher than what it is.
Ramaphosa is certain that the lockdown slowed transmissions of the virus and bought valuable time to prepare the health system for the inevitable surge in cases. More than 25,000 quarantine beds have been set up and stocks of vital personal protective equipment procured. The president also admitted that implementation of coronavirus-related laws has at times been harsh.
Some of the actions we have taken have been unclear, some have been contradictory, and some have been poorly explained. Implementation has sometimes been slow, and enforcement has sometimes been inconsistent and too harsh. We are determined and committed to ensure that all government decisions are taken in good faith, that they are reasonable and rational.
South Africa's response to the coronavirus pandemic is guided by advice from local experts and experts from around the globe. The country is also guided by the WHO. It also learns from other countries with their experiences thus far. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Staying in South Africa, access to proper sanitation facilities to control the spread of COVID-19 continues to be a challenge. Low-income communities have been hardest hit by the outbreak, but one township in Cape Town has been given a boost. A donation of self-service hand sanitation stations is helping residents protect themselves. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
Imizamuyethu is a South African township situated on the slopes of Out Bay, where the community continues to face significant density issues, which has been identified as a potential risk for the spread of COVID-19. But now the community has been given a new weapon in the arsenal to fight off COVID-19, and keeping their hands clean is a key part of it. These self-service sanitation stations have been positioned at the entry and exit points of the community, so that residents can keep their hands hygienically clean at all times.
With the sanitizer, always after 10 minutes or 15 minutes to take out that disease, because if you're not going to use that things, you're going to make a problem in an area, and then all the people must use a mask always, no matter you're at home, no matter whatever you are.
The sanitation stations have been provided courtesy of a local football club as well as the city of Cape Town, who are concerned about the community becoming a potential virus epicenter. Two 10,000-litre water tankers serve as the vessel to deliver the hand sanitizers, and residents here seem to be making very good use of them. Free hand sanitizer has been pivotal in trying to contain the spread of the virus within this community, and now residents here want other surrounding communities to have them as well.
I run a small business, a removal business, so it's even me who brought these tanks here and some water. When it's finished, they call me to fetch it and bring it. But when we deliver, we see the people, they show appreciation and very happy.
Free water has also been provided to avoid people queuing at one of the few potable water points available. And it seems right now Imizamuyethu's overall measures to fight the disease has deep support within this close-knit community. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Around the world, the aviation industry has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. In Kenya, one charter company has been feeling the pinch as flights have been grounded. CGTN's Nick Mudimba visited Tropic Air, based in Kenya's Nanyuki, to find out more.
It's one of the busiest airfields in the country due to its strategic location near tourist attraction sites like Mount Kenya, Olpejeta Conservancy and many others. But the view here shows these are unusual times. Grass now literally taking over the runway surface, the windsock showing the uncertain direction of change. Indigenous birds no longer worried about the unsettling noise from the planes. And no sounds of aircraft engines making this airfield a ghost facility. Different types of planes have been parked as the global pandemic grounded the aviation sector here. Tropic Air, which is among the leading air leasing and transport companies that has an East African footprint, is indeed going through a tough patch.
We are really suffering. We have a lot of people who have lost their jobs in the name of following. A lot of people are not earning anything. Salary cuts, we're talking about 50% salary cuts, others 25% cuts, no flights at all.
With no aircraft flying, some companies have opted to forgo insurance policies for planes to cut on costs. The hangar is busy. Many of the planes are undergoing maintenance.
Right now, because we have no flying, we are doing maintenance before the coronavirus ends for the season. After the coronavirus has come to an end, we are expecting a very busy flying season.
At the office, the doors are locked with no staff in sight.
After we open our borders, after we think everything is back to normal, there'll be still serious travel restrictions. Who wants to expose their kids to coronavirus even if there's a vaccine?
For the planes which aren't airborne, the lack of flying remains costly to the company. So this plane is known as a Cessna Grand Caravan. It's been parked here for more than 2.5 months. Now, when you talk about technical issues, it operates under 25.3 volts on a good day. That's a busy day. Right now, it's actually doing 24.1 volts, meaning the plane hasn't been so busy and that it will need a boost for them to start. And that, again, is totally another ballgame. For the support staff, adjusting is the norm.
We must have to survive with the pay cuts. That's all I can say.
We bumped into Nicholas Cedron, a private pilot who uses the airstrip frequently. His story wasn't different. Jet fuel prices haven't gone down.
Actually, the prices seem to have increased since. Now, I don't fly all the time. So when I filled up in February, they were definitely more expensive now. It was 10 cents more per liter than it was in February. But I would expect that that's going to come down shortly. I just haven't seen it yet.
Indeed, special times we are living in, but again, engineers and technicians are getting set for a new dawn. A dawn that indeed they're hopeful that returns will be back to factory settings. This is not for the faint-hearted. They're here hopeful that indeed the birds will be up again and flying. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nanyuki, Kenya.
Well, let's move further afield now. Japan is lifting its state of emergency across most of the country. The Prime Minister announced today that measures will be eased in 39 of the country's 47 prefectures. But Tokyo and Osaka will keep its restrictions in place for now. A nationwide state of emergency was declared a month ago to curb the virus and ease pressure on medical services. Chinese President Xi Jinping chaired a meeting on the nation's efforts to control COVID-19 at home and abroad. He warned against complacency during a gathering of the Standing Committee of the Politburo of the CPC Central Committee. Xi also reiterated meeting the nation's goal of easing deep poverty. The Chinese leader stressed the importance of pandemic prevention in key areas, pointing to the recent cluster in the northeastern province of Jilin, and he called for ramped-up efforts in Wuhan and Hubei province, as well as in the capital Beijing, as it prepares to host thousands of the country's top lawmakers and advisors for the annual 2 sessions. The meeting also discussed ways to boost the stability and competitiveness of industrial and supply chains. A government whistleblower's testimony before the U.S. Congress has cast further doubt on the Trump administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Rick Brick was the former director of the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, which is charged with developing drugs to fight the coronavirus. He was removed from his position. Brick filed a whistleblower complaint alleging he was fired for opposing the use of hydroxychloroquine. President Trump had pushed the use of the malaria drug as a treatment option for COVID-19. Bright further accused the Trump administration of trying to bypass established scientific vetting processes. When asked about the shortage of medical supplies, Bright responded that it appeared to him there was no master coordinated plan on how to respond to the outbreak. Trump, for his part, took to Twitter, where he referred to Brick as a disgruntled employee.
Initially, our nation was not as prepared as we should have been, as we could have been. Some scientists raised early warning signals that were overlooked, and pages from our pandemic playbook were ignored by some in leadership. There will be plenty of time to look back to assess what has happened so we can improve. But right now, we need to focus on getting things right going forward. We need a comprehensive plan that everyone knows and everyone participates in.
Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Zimbabwe's vice president praises Chinese medical experts. And the Chinese Consulate General in Cape Town donates surgical masks.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Zimbabwean officials have held a meeting with Chinese medical experts to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic. Zimbabwe has so far recorded 27 cases. Chinese experts shared anti-epidemic experiences with Zimbabwe's COVID-19 task force. The meeting was also attended by the Chinese ambassador to Zimbabwe, who reiterated China's support, while Zimbabwe's vice president took time to praise China's willingness to share its expertise.
Your visit to Zimbabwe could not, therefore, have come at a more opportune moment. I would like to assure you that the comprehensive work program for the medical team, drawn up in collaboration with our Ministry of Health and Child Care, will fulfill our shared desire and intention to deepen the exchanges and cooperation on COVID-19 prevention and treatment.
Indeed, China has been helping many African countries in their fight against COVID-19. South Africa, one of the hardest hit countries on the continent, has also received Chinese expertise and help. The Deputy Speaker of the country's National Assembly commended China's efforts.
Countries like China, with the experience it has, is showing the generosity of spirit, humaneness, that our future is really interconnected. So some of the problems that may arise, as they did in this instance, where they did, and we also get impacted upon. So dealing with those problems is an important part of things we must share. The creativity with which we can handle the matters is a big matter for us. This is why we appreciate Chinese generosity in both what they are donating here today, but also in the experiences they are sharing across the board.
Meanwhile, the Chinese Consulate General in Cape Town has donated surgical masks and food supplies to vulnerable communities in the Western Cape. The donation ceremony took place at the Consulate General of China in Cape Town and was hosted by Consul General Lin Jing. South Africa's Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Solomon Tsenoli, has welcomed the much-needed donation. The Western Cape currently has the highest number of COVID-19 cases in South Africa. Tsenoli says China's experience in battling the pandemic has brought much learning and experience to South Africa. He also says the donation is timely, as South Africa is still struggling to contain the disease.
Today, we are here donating medical supplies as well as food supplies to the Parliament of South Africa, and through Parliament to the vulnerable groups in Cape Town. Since the coronavirus outbreak in South Africa, we've been following the situation very closely. We've been trying our best to mobilize resources from ourselves, from Chinese enterprises, and from Chinese communities in Cape Town to try their best to help the local government and local communities, in particular the vulnerable groups. So today's donation is one part of our serious event. Next, we'll be trying our best to organize more resources to deliver more help to the local people.
I have a person in my office who died, who was buried last week of COVID-19. And the gesture is very important in that context for us, because we can offer to staff and some members in Parliament these masks, so that in carrying out their work during this period, this is one of the most important aspects of the work we are doing. But we must also understand this gesture as constituting part of our relationship with China as South Africa, and South African Parliament in particular.
Now looking at China-Zambia ties, the first affiliated hospital of Xi'an Jiaotong University and Zambian medical experts have been participating in CGTN's special live program entitled COVID-19 Frontline. Zambian health experts say through the program they've learnt a lot from their Chinese counterparts, as they've ample experience on successfully containing the coronavirus and treating infected patients. They say China has made outstanding contributions to the world to help fight COVID-19. CGTN's COVID-19 Frontline Live program has allowed the Chinese health experts to share China's successful anti-epidemic experience. Zambia's permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health, Kennedy Malama, hopes the exchange of ideas will help Zambian health experts to effectively contain COVID-19.
My expectation that the various experts from Zambia will take advantage of this platform to ask difficult questions, because China, you remain a global model on how you fought COVID-19 to where you are today. It's unbelievable considering your huge population, and when we compare to the confirmed cases and the mortality you recorded. So indeed, we have a lot to learn.
And let's now go to Raman Young for your latest business news.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Here's what's coming up in business. Oil prices may have fallen by over 50%, but Nigeria is still sticking to its record 2020 spending plan of more than $26 billion. And Libya's oil revenues will drop by over 80% this year.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Nigeria looks set to maintain its record 2020 budget of more than $26 billion. That decision comes in after a boost in healthcare spending in order to fight the coronavirus outbreak outweighed an earlier decision to cut spending in order to deal with the impact of a crash in oil prices. The cabinet approved the revised budget in December, and spending related to COVID-19 had not been previously captured in that spending plan. The budget revisions approved at Wednesday's ministerial meeting, however, had an oil price assumption of $25 a barrel, oil output at about 1.94 million barrels a day, and an exchange rate of about 360 naira to the dollar. That's essentially the main elements of the framework for the 2020 to 2022 spending plan. Still in Nigeria, the country's petroleum subsidy has had a very long and very contentious issue. It costs the country billions of dollars every year directly, and we're not even looking at the opportunity cost incurred. Previous attempts by governments to remove the subsidy have always been met with fierce resistance and in some cases even labor strikes. But with the collapse of global crude oil prices now forcing domestic prices of fuel to come down significantly, the government has decided this is an ideal time to finally yank the subsidy. Here's CGTN's Dejis Badmus with the details.
The move to scrap fuel subsidies is a big gamble by the government, but one it is hoping might work out eventually without any blowback. Experts though say the policy is fundamentally flawed and could be defeated if the government doesn't embark on full deregulation of the country's downstream petroleum sector.
This is the most auspicious time for the government to deregulate, because if they deregulate, the price of petroleum products or price of PMS, that is premium motor spirit, will come below what it is today. And when international prices begin to go up, the citizens will realize that this is a deregulated product and the government does not need to fix the price. And so if they have to pay more to buy fuel at the pump head, they will accept it. But if that does not happen until the price of crude starts to go up again, the government will find it difficult to remove the subsidy, or will find it difficult to deregulate.
There are three components to fuel subsidy. There is the under recovery, which is what I think they have removed. There's another component to do with FX subsidy, because they get foreign exchange at a lower rate than you would get in the exporter and investors window. And then there's a third component to do with taxes. So taxes such as VAT, by law, are applicable on petrol and other petroleum products, but they haven't been charged. They've been suspended for years. That's also a form of subsidy. Before you start adjusting the price of pump price to something else, you need to make sure that all those three subsidies are removed. And if you do that, that can easily add about 2 trillion to government revenue.
Indeed, completely removing the subsidy would save the country billions of dollars it could put to better use elsewhere in the economy. The petrol subsidy is a very sensitive political issue in Africa's largest oil producer.
If you deregulate that downstream today, in less than 2 years, the price of petrol can go as high as 500 naira per liter. But if we were to be refining locally, if prices of crude oil go up, that quantity we have that we will refine locally, we will sell them here and make good money. Then the other one we export, we make good money.
So far, there hasn't been any complaint about the new policy of the government from the usual quarters, the labor unions. And part of that could be because the current price of petrol is lower than what it was selling before. But things may change when the global price of crude rebounds, as that would certainly push domestic petrol prices up. So it's actually still early days to tell if the government has really done away with the country's controversial subsidy for good. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos.
Now, Libya's central bank says that oil revenues will fall by almost 84% this year. The North African country highly depends on revenue from its petroleum industry, and that actually represents over 95% of export earnings and about 60% of GDP. Here's CGTN's Adel El-Marouki with all the details.
Libya's central bank is warning that oil revenues in 2020 could drop to just $5 billion if the closure of oil fields continues. It's a sharp drop from the $31 billion reported last year. Since January 18, on the eve of the Berlin Libya conference, all Libya's oil fields controlled by the Libyan National Army forces have shut down.
Libya has unfortunately faced losses estimated at $4.5 billion since January because of the lockdown led by some parties. They have put forward some conditions, among them to change the head of the National Oil Authority and to relocate its headquarters to Benghazi. They have also demanded the sacking of the head of the central bank, who has been authorizing major finances to the militias supporting the government of national accord.
The LNA-enforced oil siege has deprived the country from its only significant source of foreign currency. Now the fiscal deficit is forecasted to widen to $19 billion from a surplus of $1.8 billion in 2019, depriving Libyans from basic necessities, including electricity.
Libyans are definitely suffering tremendously. There is an economic recession. It lost some $100 billion since 2011 in finances spent on arms and militias. Libya has lost investments poured into oil, gas and infrastructure because of the volatile security situation.
The only oil field officially operating is Al Bouri. It produces some 30,000 barrels a day, all of which exported to Italy. This oil field in the northwest is controlled by the government of national accord, which has been fending off the LNA's military offensive on the capital Tripoli for more than a year now. But most of the country's oil production comes from the east and south regions, which General Khalifa Haftar's LNA forces control. International restrictions have given the Libyan National Oil Company exclusive rights to trade in the nation's oil. The company is currently based in Tripoli. It wires its revenues to the central bank, which the GNA controls. The lack of balance in distributing oil revenues has encouraged the LNA forces to keep the oil lockdown enforced. The step has not stopped the civil war, though. With official oil exports dropping by more than 92%, Libya's economy is sinking under these dire circumstances. Adel El-Marouki, CGTN, Cairo.
On to South Africa now, where 3 million people have already applied for the state's new $20 a month grant. Applications for it open on Monday. Now, the monthly special grant is intended to provide money to unemployed South Africans who receive no other form of assistance from the state. If all 3 million applications are successful, the state would essentially be paying out an extra $566 million every month. That's about half of its current monthly social grants bill. Government has also upped payout to other grants by another $269.4 million every month during a time when other sources of income have been greatly disrupted. The Solidarity Fund, in the meantime, has raised $145 million. Those funds came from 175 individuals and more than 1,500 companies and foundations across the country. For the fields now, the chair of the United States Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, says the country could face an extended period of weak growth and stagnant income. He added that the downturn will likely be significantly worse than any recession since World War II. He pledged to use more power at the Federal Reserve as needed and issued a direct call for a lot more fiscal spending. Powell also said that additional fiscal support could be costly in the short term, but it's worth it, he says, if it helps to avoid long-term economic damage and leaves the economy on the path to a much stronger, sustainable recovery. The United States Congress has already allocated some $3 trillion so far just in economic relief.
Avoidable household and business insolvencies can weigh on growth for years to come. Long stretches of unemployment can damage or end workers' careers as their skills lose value and professional networks dry up, and leave families in greater debt. The loss of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses across the country would destroy the life's work and family legacy of many businesses and community leaders, and limit the strength of the recovery when it comes.
And finally, some parts of the United States have already started to reopen enterprises. Others, however, still debating how and when to get the economies moving once again. Here's GTN's Roy Rosenberg now looking at some of the advantages and the problems that they're running into.
Across the country, hair salons, restaurants, cinemas, and gyms in some places welcoming people back. Eagerly, but cautiously, with new guidelines in place, masks to be worn, capacities limited, and social distances maintained. But that may prove difficult in some places, like in the air. Americans are starting to fly again. The number of passengers going through security is at its highest level in 6 weeks.
There's a smart way to do this. We need to ensure that we're doing everything we can to prevent unnecessary additional preventable risk for our passengers.
Some parents are eager to get their kids back to school. But is it safe?
I have 39 kids in my classroom 1 year. How are you going to socially distance 39 kids?
With many states pushing to reopen even before meeting Washington's criteria to do so, public health experts are warning of a possible surge in new infections and deaths. In some states, infection rates are still going up. Officials are trying to balance those concerns with the economic cost of remaining closed.
The scope and speed of this downturn are without modern precedent, significantly worse than any recession since World War II.
In Las Vegas, culinary workers told they'll soon go back to work staged a drive-by protest. They're demanding transparency in the state's plan to reopen casinos, a major source of revenue for Nevada. Specifically, they want to see the safety plans for doing so. The University of California said it's unlikely its campuses will reopen in the fall. That includes UCLA and UC Berkeley. It affects more than 250,000 college students, including thousands from China. And Broadway's bright lights will remain dimmed through the summer. But the Trump administration has largely left the critical decisions on how and when to reopen to the states, giving only guidance. President Trump has been pushing Americans to get back to work. White House officials say there is a risk, but note there's a risk to everything. Roby Ruttenberg, CGTN in Washington.
And I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour. We'll be in the world's youngest country, South Sudan. The country has decided to reopen its airports. What exactly should you expect if you happen to land in Juba? We'll explore that live from that very city at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Raman. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's coming up in your sports news. Golf South Africa launches a relief initiative for caddies affected by COVID-19.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player?